Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Think you know about teamwork? Today you'll learn how to make your team unstoppable from our guest, Alden Mills. Alden, thanks for being with us today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Bill.
Well, it's an honor talking to you because I'm going to let our audience know you are a Navy SEAL. Am I correct?
I am.
And
my wife would like to point out that I'm a former Navy SEAL.
Well, I didn't know. I thought a Navy SEAL is a Navy SEAL. Once you've accomplished that, and that's some accomplishment, as we'll be telling our audience. So I think we begin by thanking you for your service, for doing all that and risking your life and limb and everything else for us. But how come a Navy SEAL is writing a book on unstoppable teams?
You know, when you look back at what a SEAL team does, and really a SEAL team is broken down to a platoon, 16 men. We're now open for women, by the way. And here we are, a 16-person unit taking on units much larger than them. And it's not just because we've got some fancy new gadgetry for a weapon. It really comes down to the force multiplying effect of what 16 people can do to make themselves what they would call a force multiplying effect on the battlefield. And my point of doing this was not only saying, look, I'm a former Navy SEAL, that gives me some credibility to talk about how to turn groups of individuals into a force multiplier, but also to let the reader know that I've had these experiences and I've taken what I've learned from SEAL Team and applied it as an entrepreneur and as a community activist and as someone who's led charities as well.
So, in other words, that can be helpful to all of us because either we're a teacher, we're a plumber, we're running an organization, maybe a Kiwanis club, a PTA, and if not, we're running a business or taking a managerial part in it. So we're going to learn something today. Is that right?
That's the point. And the point is to really let people know, like, if they hear, former Navy SEAL talking about, well, I can never be a Navy SEAL. And that's right. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL. But what you do have to understand is that the principles of building and leading teams are the same regardless of what industry, what environment you're in.
And you point out early in your book, for instance, when the Naval Academy is matched against other teams, they're often bigger, stronger, larger schools. And I think you were talking about the crew team at the beginning of your book. And yet, within months of training, that team, those individuals, literally become a team and become highly competitive. And as we know from watching Navy football, they're in the top 25 every year. So they're fighting against the Notre Dames, the Alabamas, the biggest teams we can imagine in the country and biggest people. And yet they're able to do it. So if they can, I think we can trust what you have to say. Now, you mentioned about unstoppable teams depending on 4 things. Can you talk about that?
What I talk about with an unstoppable team is I talk about my framework for building out, taking groups and turning them into teams. And that framework is called the care loop, and working on the individual things that are the single most powerful drivers for the human. And that's really getting to the emotional piece. And I break the care loop, or care, into these 4 actions: connect, achieve, respect, and empower.
All right, so connect, we're just going to say it slowly. Connect, achieve, respect, and what was the last one?
Empower.
Empower, okay.
Which spells out the word, I turned care into an acronym. And I love Teddy Roosevelt's old quotation, which is still true today, and that is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
And I see that thing throughout your book, yeah.
Yeah, and so the key question is, how do you get people to care, and what does it mean to care? And that's where I really delve deeper into this book and help people activate everybody's emotional drivers to want to mentally be a part of something bigger than themselves.
And if I'm right, I think I took this right out of your book, you say that humans reciprocate when care is bestowed upon them. So is that kind of the secret?
That is. And, here's the simplest way to think about it. For the large majority of all of us, unless you're a psychopath where the amygdala isn't firing in your brain, you're going to reciprocate with care. And this is a proven scientific fact, by the way. It's not just Alden speaking. If somebody holds the door open for you, you'll turn around and hold the door open for the next person. That simple element of reciprocity gets exponentially grown when you start taking the first step as a leader and caring for each individual on that team in ways where they start to trust you, and eventually they start not worrying about their selfish desires and start thinking selflessly about the team's objectives.
Now, one of the things in your book that I want you to explain, because I need an understanding of this, you say unstoppable teams thrive in uncertainty. Now, why is that? I would think for all of us, uncertainty is the difficult part of life. As you get experience, you do better in things. Why are your teams so good in an uncertain situation?
Well, if you think about what innovation is or change, those are basically synonymous words. And anything out there that you're trying to do something greater than manage a simple project, what a lot of people confuse is we're putting a team together to go from A to B in something relatively simple. The teams I'm referring to could be a sports team trying to win back-to-back championships, or it could be a business trying to launch a radically new-to-the-world product, something where there's high levels of unknown and uncertainty in the outcome. And when you have an unstoppable team, it's almost more like an amoeba in how it will surround a problem and come at it from all different sides, right? Like an amoeba absorbing a piece of food. Everybody on that team is curious and hungry to attack the problem at hand. Now, I didn't always say they would enjoy it, but the point is they're open-minded and willing to take on those new ideas.
Alden, we want our audience to know if they're just tuning in and thinking, who are they listening to and what is this guy talking about? Well, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today we're talking to Navy SEAL Alden Mills. He's the author of a book, Unstoppable Teams. And Alden, if someone wants to know more about this, can you tell us where we can get the book, and is there a website we should be looking at?
Well, my website is alden-mills.com, and my book is available at almost all local independent bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon.com.
And I will tell readers, first of all, and you might expect when you're talking about a Navy SEAL, a very interesting read. Not a very long book, so it's the kind you can pick up. I think it's 200 and something pages, just a little over 200. Mm-hmm. You can pick it up in an airport. You can pick it up when you're sitting down, and you're going to do better at what you're doing. You're going to lead your team better, and you're going to make your entire team and organization better if you are applying the principles that Alden brings out. When we think of a Navy SEAL, we think of the toughest of the tough, the people with stamina, goal-oriented. But in addition to that, you're also a very successful businessman. Am I correct?
Yes.
And don't be modest. We want you to tell the audience so we can brag.
Well, Bill, at the time, you don't always feel successful when you're going through what seems like one insurmountable obstacle at a time. But yes, they have said I've been quite successful in business.
And I will tell people it's the kind of success that has hundreds of millions in it and dollars after it. And we're not just talking about someone who got a job someplace and did well. You know what you're doing. You've applied the principles of the Navy SEAL and what you've learned. And I think if we follow your advice, we're going to be doing very well ourselves. Give us a little insight into becoming a SEAL. I know I was amazed in reading your book. I think you started out with a group of 122, and that got wheedled down in, 8 or 10 weeks, something like that?
Well, the entire training is about 30 weeks.
30 weeks, okay.
And the first big weed out occurred at the end of the 7th week, where we basically went from a pre-phase training class to classing up. And we went from 122 to 64. And then about 6 weeks after that, we were down to 18, and then roughly, I believe it was 12 originals graduated.
So you went from 122 down to 12 that graduated. And to begin with, these are people who qualified. They're obviously tough. They're physically fit. They're mentally sharp. And it went from 122 to 12.
Correct.
And you're one of the 12. That was amazing. I mean, when I'm thinking, because you're not talking about just picking people out of a crowd and saying, can you do it? And I think, if I remember, one of the tests that you had to go through, if I recall, they tied your hands, and with your hands tied, you had to swim 300 yards or something like that. Was that correct?
That's correct. They tie your hands behind your back, and they tie your feet together. And now this is a process, right? They don't do it in day one, but that's the final test, is you have to be able to swim 300 yards, float for 10 minutes, bob for 10 minutes, which is actually a lot harder than it sounds, and then go down to the bottom of the 9-foot section of the pool and pick a mask up with your teeth and bring it to the side of the pool.
And I'm someone who can't swim from one end of a hotel pool to the other. And that's with arms free and legs free. And you did this with being legs tied, hands tied. And by the way, I think if I recall, again, if I remember well from your book, the commanding officer said, before anybody jumps in the water, I just want you to know you might die in this drill. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's good he warned.
That instructor psycho.
That would get me very quickly into that group that either dropped out or was asked to leave or whatever. But obviously you stayed with it. So just to give our audience a inkling of what you went through to do this, and that's one drill over 30 weeks to be called a Navy SEAL and to qualify. So we know we're talking to somebody very special and who's given a lot for our country. And we, as I said before the show, on behalf of all our listeners, we want to thank you very much for that. Now, one of the things you mention in your book, you say, imagine you're surrounded by people who will not let you fail. Is that even possible, and how does that work?
Number one, it absolutely is possible, and that's the power of a team. That's what we're actually after here, is that when everybody becomes an owner in the outcome of the team, when somebody goes down, and when I mean goes down, has a dip in motivation, has a negative outlook for a little period of time, has that storm cloud over their head, which, by the way, we all get. We're all imperfect, and that's kind of the beauty of a team. It's like we're all these different puzzle pieces, and the team leader's job is to figure out ways to assemble them all to come together to build something much more powerful than any one individual. And the glue that brings all these puzzle pieces together is dealing with the drivers of the human. And that driver, the key driver, is our most powerful baseline emotion, which is care. And care, over time, can actually grow into love. And yes, a Navy SEAL is talking about loving your teammates. At the end of the day, we're not looking to die for our country, but we will die for our teammates. The idea of letting one of them down can be worse than the idea of death itself.
I think you've said it all in that, and that magic word care keeps coming up. So I think we're going to hear more of that. But at this point in the show, we like to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Today we're talking to Alden Mills, author of Unstoppable Teams. And we'll be right back after this brief break.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't sat in your lap in months. And even more stuff, but still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed, and they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs, and it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover guitar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today we're speaking to Alden Mills, author of Unstoppable Teams, here on The Secrets of Success at Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Alden, you mentioned that the foundation of every great team is the team inside of you. Now, that's a different quote, and we haven't come across that before. Can you explain what that means and how we can put that into action?
Yes. Actually, the first portion of the book is focused not on leading others, but leading your internal team, leading yourself. And I give a series of different stories, but one of the first stories that I talk about is a story that they impress upon us the moment we start SEAL training. And it's learning how to lead the conversation inside of you. Now, at the heart of it, I will talk about three different things that we can control: how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And there are these different conversations that run around in our mind, and I'll call it your heart, your soul, right? And it's the yin and the yang, that negative and that positive. In the head and the heart is how I'll talk about it in the book. There's that whiner that tells you, how do you know you can do this? Why do you think you can do this? You know how many people have quit trying to get through SEAL training, right? All these little factoids that aren't being particularly helpful in getting you to where you're trying to go. And then there's another voice that's a lot quieter that says things like, try again. Get up. Do it again. Keep going. And that conversation happens inside all of us. We can never eliminate it completely. At least that's been my experience, that those passengers are with us from when we were born to when we finally get promoted to somewhere else. And the more you can learn to lead that conversation inside of you, you then become a mirror, and your actions reflect on those around you when you're leading others. And when you're leading others, it's so helpful to understand when you're self-aware of that conversation inside of you, because you know others are having that same conversation. So the better you can lead it inside of you, the better you can help others lead it for themselves.
Now, for most of us, that's a mental drill. And, we're sitting in a business office, a law office, accounting, architectural, whatever, sales. We can say, okay, make 5 more phone calls. I'm tired, but I can do it. It's getting dark out. But here you are, exhausted, getting up early, swimming, running, doing physical things all day, being pushed to the limit just to see who's the best of the best of the best. How were you able to do this? Was it just say the word focus over and over? What gave you that control over yourself, really?
Well, focus definitely is a key word. One of the things that instructors love to spend a lot of time on is trying to shift your focus to how miserable you are, or how cold you are, or how poorly you just performed the last exercise, and trying to break you down. And that's definitely a piece of it. And learning how to focus internally, saying, okay, yeah, I didn't do 20 pull-ups this time around. I only did 18, but that's okay. I'll come back at it. But the other piece of it is that when you're in that really dark, scary, cold place, and you're really doubting yourself, and we've all had those doubts, that I use a little framework that I talk about in the book called an outcome account. And when I'm at that point where I'm thinking about quitting, I think for a moment about what it will be like to quit. What's it look like? What's my life look like an hour from now, a week, a day, a month, 2 years from now? What's the outcome of my action that I take from quitting? And what's the outcome that I take from persevering? And I will use both of those as ways to power me through those darkest of times.
But I go back to, that's kind of relatively easy for a teacher, a salesperson, a lawyer who has to put in another hour, or a doctor who might want to be just out with his friends or her friends. But you were doing this physically, where we know the body wears down. After a while, the body says, I'm not going to do it. You go ahead. That's it. I'm tired. I'm sick of people yelling at me all day. It's hot. There's bugs all around. I could die from any of these things that I'm doing, and I'm being told that and warned. Was it just in your mind you were able to do that, or was there some magic mantra or something you thought of, your favorite actor, actress, baseball player or something?
I always ended up linking the outcome with the people that mattered most in my life. So if I were to quit, I would visualize, what's it going to be like when I go home and tell the people, the very people that told me I couldn't do it in the first place, and have them hear me say I quit, and then them saying, I told you so, I knew you wouldn't make it. And then I go a step further when that didn't become motivating for me anymore, and I would visualize my parents having to make excuses for me on, well, at least he tried. And then finally I'd take it a step further, and I'd make this movie in my head about 20, 30 years from now, what is it going to be like telling my own children or my grandkids, well, don't do what your grandfather did and quit, stick it out, right? And I got very creative at ways to keep myself motivated, because I'll tell you right now, there were definitely dark moments there, dark moments starting businesses, growing businesses. There have been all kinds of moments throughout my life where I have failed many more times than I've succeeded, but every time I've been able to get up one more time than I've tripped.
There's something magical, I think, about thinking of the children and the grandchildren. I think for all of us, depending what stage of life we're at, if anything is going to push us along the way, it's thinking of the children and the grandchildren and the spouse, probably in that order, to try to force us through. Alden, at this point in the show, we like to remind our audience that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Today we're speaking with Navy SEAL Alden Mills. He's the author of the book, Unstoppable Teams. And Alden, you were just mentioning something about, before we do that, I want to let our audience know, tell us if someone wants to know more about the book, is there a website we can go to and find out more information?
Yes, you can come to my website, which is www.alden-mills.com. And you can also find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all kinds of independent bookstores, hopefully right near you.
And we'll ask you to give that once more before the end of the show. And also to our audience, if you missed the first part of the show and you're interested, you can go to nccradio.org and listen to a podcast of the show. You can listen to it at your leisure. If you think you like what Alden's saying, if it makes a lot of sense, you want to use it in your practice, your medical practice, your accounting office, or your company, just grab hold of your special device and listen to it at your leisure. You can listen to the show and then go out and get a copy of Alden's book, Unstoppable Teams, by our guest, Alden Mills. Now, Alden, you were saying about black moments and dark moments in life. Not only is it difficult physically to be certainly a Navy SEAL, and you told us what you went through with that and how the teams were wheedled down to 1 out of every 10 virtually, but you're a businessman, and you had a very, very dark problem in the business world. And I'm guessing that those Navy skills and those SEAL skills helped you there. And some of our listeners may have experienced this, where the bank pulls your credit line. So can you give us that scenario?
Oh, you're going to put me into PTSD just thinking about that one, Bill.
Well, you're doing it to help our audience. So,
yes, and I'm here to tell that audience there is always a path forward. And in that particular scene that you're referring to, which I talk about in the book, is right after Inc. magazine discovered through a bunch of analytics that we were the fastest growing consumer products company in the country, did a big article on us in the Inc. 500. And within 3 months, that was 2009, the market fell apart. We were going into, the president at the time was saying this is the second Great Depression. And it was almost as if our sales shut off like a light switch. And I felt like I went from Darling to Dumbo in all of about 3 months. And shortly after that, the bank froze our line of credit and then said, we're thinking of calling it. And that was a real problem because we had a $15 million line. We had $8.8 million outstanding. We were all personally guaranteed, and I say all. I had 2 partners in the business. And we certainly don't live in homes that were valued to cover the line of an $8.8 million loan. And they were telling us we had 30 days to pay it back.
So for the rest of us, I just want to interrupt you for a minute and just to set that scene. For the rest of us, this means you're running a business with essentially no money. And where the bank was giving it to you and lending it to you with the expectation of being paid back, you're told in 30 days that's going to stop. So that means paying suppliers, vendors, your employees, and if you can't pay it back, your personal items are at risk. Did I hear you say that?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, I just wanted to set the scary scene.
Yeah, they sent people to go value your house. Well, how much can I sell this house for? And they take possession of my house. And, my wife at that time was pregnant with our 4th child. I mean, thank God she didn't miscarry from that period of time. And so what ends up happening in the story is the bank wants our focus to be on 30 days. And we want to shift the bank's focus to paying them back in full in 300 days. And our rationale was, if you make us pay it back in 30 days, you kill the golden goose. There's no golden guts here. It's just, you're going to kill the goose and we'll never be able to pay you back everything. And they're like, that's fine. We'll do a discount on what you owe us. And we're like, we don't want a discount. We'll pay you back in full, but give us more time. Now, of course, they don't immediately go from 30 days to 300, but week after week after week, we proved how much we cared about paying back that loan. And little by little, they gave us just enough rope to keep going until we paid them back in just under 300 days, the full amount that was owed.
Just what we want, a happy ending to a wonderful book. The book is Unstoppable Teams. It's by our guest, Alden Mills. Alden, once again, the website?
Alden-Mills.com.
Thanks so much for being with us today. We'd like to remind our audience that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.